What is up, movie friends? Welcome back to Raiders of the Lost podcast. I'm Anthony.
And I'm James, and this is episode 53. We're going to be doing There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men. We can call this the masterpiece episode. Two of our favorite films. We have obviously posters of them on our walls. I would probably put No Country for Old Men as my number one favorite film. I think it's a perfect film. I think There Will Be Blood is also my top five. Every time I watch them, I've probably seen them both a dozen times. Every time I watch There Will Be Blood, I just can't stop thinking this is one of the greatest films ever made in general. And Paul Thomas Anderson, the Coen Brothers, it's insane we haven't talked about them yet, which is just letting everyone know, like, we have a lot of movies and content to get to. So I'm really excited to be talking about these two filmmakers because I love the Coen Brothers. Every single one of their movies is great. But I mean, Paul Thomas Anderson, I think a lot, like living filmmakers, he might be the most artistic and possibly the best living filmmaker right now.
Yeah, that's a great argument, and it can be justified from his work. And There Will Be Blood is my favorite movie. It's the movie that when I saw that when I was in high school, it made me think about movies in a different way and really made me fall in love with cinema itself. So that was the catalyst for that when I saw that movie. And these aren't just our favorite movies, but they actually came out at the same time. They were actually competing at the Academy Awards for Best Picture and all the other nominations. And No Country ended up winning, which, I mean, you can make the case for either one to win Best Picture, but it's the word masterpiece is used a lot, but with these two movies, they really are true masterpieces of the 21st century. And if you make a list of like the top 10 movies made in the last 20 years, these two films have to be on it.
Absolutely have to be on it. And obviously we know Daniel Day-Lewis won Best Actor for his iconic performance as Daniel Plainview, probably the greatest acting performance that we'll ever see in cinema. And then Josh Brolin and Javier Bardem are great as the other co-leads in No Country, as well as Tommy Lee Jones is fantastic. So a ton of great high-caliber acting, high-caliber directing. Both these films are very similar. They're shot in the same areas in West Texas and New Mexico. So they have very similar aesthetics, a lot of natural cinematography, great cinematography from Robert Elswit for Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood, and then Roger Deakins, the legend, doing the Coen Brothers' No Country. And they complement each other so well, these two movies. And they're kind of just similar themes, similar blending of genres, especially No Country, because No Country is like a thriller / western / suspense. And then There Will Be Blood is kind of similar too, where it's just the suspenseful thriller, but also undertones of power and greed and capitalism, and they're both just amazing.
Yeah, 100%. And Robert Elswit was the cinematographer who won the Oscar. So There Will Be Blood won the 2 Oscars for Daniel Day, and then for Elswit, and then No Country won the rest of the awards they were competing against. And this is one of the best shot movies of the last, you gotta say, like 50 years. It's absolutely stunning. And Roger Deakins, that No Country, also a phenomenal job. It's one of his last films he shot on film. That's a non-Coen Brothers movie. In the early 2010s, he started going pretty much digital except for the Coens, so it's always great to see his stuff on film. And in terms of, like you said, the performances are amazing. The films are very similar, especially the tones. I think that movies in Hollywood, they kind of have waves. There are waves of genres and ideas and tones that people like to see in movies, and I think in this time, there was a period where people were really interested in seeing like dark dramas, period pieces. And this is a year that a lot of great movies came out. And these two were obviously the top of the cream of the crop. And they are very similar in terms of how the stories are told because they're very slow, extremely well-paced, meticulously directed. And the opening of both of these movies, they start with very minimal dialogue for the first 15 minutes of each film. No Country only has a little bit of dialogue, and then There Will Be Blood basically has no dialogue for the first 15 minutes. So it showed the true craftsmanship of directing in terms of you can have a film keep people enthralled without having anyone speaking.
And both these films are based off books. No Country for Old Men might be the best book adaptation I've ever seen in terms of how closely it resembles the book, the No Country for Old Men novel written by Cormac McCarthy. And so whenever we talk about No Country and the storytelling, we'll just assume that we're also talking about Cormac McCarthy because a lot of the dialogue is verbatim from that book to the film. But obviously the dialogue, it takes on a new life when it's being spoken by these great actors. But really, it's both the Coen Brothers and Cormac McCarthy telling this amazing story with these amazing characters. And then There'll Be Blood is loosely based off the book Oil by Upton Sinclair. Really just like the first 150 pages. The rest of the book, it's focused on the son. So that's really what PTA took out of that book.
Yeah, Oil is basically HW is his point of view for the book. He's the main character. And then I won't say No Country is the best novel adaptation. There's a bunch of really good ones, but I would say it's the most faithful.
Yeah, that's what I mean, like most accurate. And
yeah, because it is like, if you've read the book, it's like page for page, the movie follows the book like perfectly, and it's amazing. The only difference is they left the ending ambiguous in the film, where you learn a little bit more about the ending in the novel, which we'll talk about later when we get to that.
And also, I think the Coen Brothers like kind of invented the shotgun that Anton Chigurh
that's
uses.
not it. Yeah.
So just little things like that, but in terms of like, again, dialogue, scenes, characters, it's spot on.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And this was a great year for movies, and easily one of the best years of the century so far for film.
Yeah, we did a compilation video for TikTok if anyone's seen it. One of the best years ever. It was 2007. It was absurd. Mm-hmm. A major contrast between these films is film scores and music, and obviously Johnny Greenwood did There'll Be Blood, this amazing, eerie, heavy string score, and it's like almost undertones of of a horror genre at the same time, which I think that's what PTA is going for. It's almost like a horror movie at the same time as this dark drama. And Johnny Greenwood, he's obviously infamous for being the legendary guitarist of Radiohead. This is, I think, one of his first films he ever scored. I think it was the first one, maybe.
He made a couple in the early 2000s.
Major Hollywood production then.
He did a couple foreign films.
And his score is one of the best parts of this film, because we'll get into more of like the editing and cinematography and the way that PTA shot this, and how the score really envelops you and brings you into the story more and more. Whereas No Country for Old Men, I think there's maybe like 15 seconds of score. There's
16 minutes.
16 minutes?
So there's
so wrong. There's very undertone.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's 16 minutes, but it's very subtle. And probably the best instance of hearing music in that movie is near the end, when Tommy Lee Jones's character Ed Tom enters the motel after the scene of Llewellyn's death, and then you can hear the music actually get louder and louder as he approaches the door. And that's basically the only instance of the movie where you even notice music.
Yeah, otherwise, another time it's when Carson Wells and Chigurh are talking. There's some music right before he kills him.
It's all very subtle, and you barely hear anything when you do hear it. So, but the movie, for the most part, is quiet, and I think that's one of the strengths of the movie, whereas one of the strengths of There'll Be Blood is the music, because Greenwood created one of the most inventive scores you've ever heard. And I think
in terms of Hollywood, but there's been a lot of composers, and this is an entire like style of modern.
Yeah, like Arvo Parr is a great classical composer, modern one who makes music like this, and you can listen, you can hear the voice of Johnny Greenwood in his film scores. You can hear the same voice in Radiohead's music, because he's the guitarist and he comes up with most of the main themes of the music, most of them, not all of them, and he often likes to play his guitar with 16th notes, which are, you just play the notes as like very quickly, and his music spreads in waves in those songs, just like
with
it does,
delays.
Yeah, just like how he does it in There'll Be Blood, but he just changed the instruments to a string quartet.
Yeah, I would recommend, if you're a fan of guitar work or guitarists and musicians, if you watch like live performances of Radiohead and like look up like Johnny Greenwood playing guitar on stage, because live performances are obviously so much different than studio albums and tracks, where they just experiment so much more on stage and just kind of improvise a lot. And you can, like you just said, you can hear his voice in his film scores just like you hear it when you see him perform guitar live.
Exactly. It's the same thing as like, every band has their own unique voice. Every film composer has their unique voice. So if a musician is going to make a rock song in a film score, it makes sense that the voice is still present and still identifiable.
And Johnny Greenwood does all of PTA's movies. Like The Master is an amazing score too.
So yeah, he did it. This was his first one with him, and otherwise PTA had a couple other composers. But you can tell with Punch Drunk Love, it has a very similar kind of tone, whereas the music is very strange. And I think that's what PTA likes. He likes his scores to just be unique and very different, other than like Phantom Thread, which is just plain beautiful.
Yeah.
But his other movies, the scores are very strange. You don't really hear music like that in films.
Like a lot of his characters. Like the character of that film is a very odd guy, and the music kind of matches that like classic Hollywood, like cinematic music mixed with like some weird stuff going on too.
Exactly, yeah.
As always, spoilers are abound. We're assuming you have all seen both these movies, so FYI, they're coming. This episode of Raiders of the Lost podcast is brought to you by Manscaped. Get 20% off your order and free shipping using coupon code Raiders of the Lost. Fellas, we all gotta groom. It's a part of life, especially during lockdown. Manscaped has this amazing new lawnmower. It's got a light on it. It's waterproof. They sent us that. They sent us their weed whacker. They sent us pretty much everything that they sell. The deodorants, their deodorizers,
The colognes,
briefs, t-shirts.
yeah.
Everything is amazing. Such phenomenal products. So
I'm wearing the t-shirt right now.
yeah, guys, you got to get on manscaped.com. The best clippers I've ever used in my life. I've been using those store brand ones that pull out hairs, and it's the worst. And it's actually high quality stuff. And it's every time I click it on, it's like, oh my god, it's like I just want to watch it and listen to it buzz. It's like 8,000 RPM. It's insane. Use our coupon code Raiders of the Lost for 20% off your entire order year round and free shipping. Again, Raiders of the Lost at checkout. Manscaped.com. There Will Be Blood, directed in 2007 by Paul Thomas Anderson. Written by Paul Thomas Anderson, based on the book Oil by Upton Sinclair. This film stars Daniel Day-Lewis, Paul Dano, and Dylan Frazier. This movie had a budget of $25 million and a worldwide box office of $76 million. A turn-of-the-century oil prospector ruthlessly sacrifices everything in order to gain immense wealth and power.
Like I said earlier, this is easily one of the greatest masterpieces of the last century, and it will go down as one of the best American films ever made. And Paul Thomas Anderson's directing in this is revolutionary, not just in terms of filmmaking itself, but he made a big transition in his career with this film. His first few films, I'm talking like Hard Eight, Boogie Nights, Magnolia, not so much Punch Drunk Love, but his first three films, they were very much inspired by another filmmaker, Robert Altman, who was a big director in the 80s and 90s, and he passed away, I think, 15 years ago now, almost. And he was synonymous for making these ensemble movies with a large cast, interweaving storylines. He liked to use a lot of long takes. He liked to move his camera around really quickly, use the environments. Like in the film The Player, he has an amazing 10-minute opening shot with Tim Robbins on a film studio. And so Robert Altman was Paul Thomas Anderson's favorite filmmaker. So a lot of his films, they took inspiration from Altman in terms of directing. So those movies weren't fully PTA. They weren't fully Paul Thomas Anderson movies. But then with Punch Drunk Love, it's his first movie with just one lead character for the most part. It's not an ensemble, and it's a very simple story about a character piece rather than intersecting ensemble characters. And then with There Will Be Blood, he finally translated his real voice as a filmmaker into an epic scale and created a masterpiece. And then I think this is the defining moment in Paul Thomas Anderson's career where he finally found his true voice as a filmmaker and became a much more talented, patient, and confident director in his own voice with this movie.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think There Will Be Blood's his best movie. I think he's made two masterpieces, though, because I think Boogie Nights is a masterpiece as well, too.
The Master is amazing as well.
Yeah, I mean, The Master, the guy probably has made three masterpieces then. I mean, I love Punch Drunk Love, too. He's probably he's one of my top 5 favorite filmmakers. And you're right. I mean, Boogie Nights is an amazing movie, but there's a lot of characters going on, a lot of different storylines. And he just has an amazing way when he's focusing on just a couple or 3 characters tops to really flesh them out and really write them uniquely. And just like Daniel Day-Lewis's depiction of Daniel Plainview, which obviously PTA wrote and then Daniel Day created, the most fleshed out character I've ever seen in a movie. Like, this is like every movie I've ever seen, this is a real person.
The movie is a character piece.
It really is.
Yeah, that's all it is.
And so he has an amazing job after just focusing on those ensembles, just to like put all of his effort into the character becoming the real movie. The story is all about the character.
Yeah. And that's what I think changed with this film, because the other movies was about the characters intersecting and how their lives became crossed. But now, like you said, when he focuses on one character, the film becomes monumental because of it. Also, his directing, he still uses a lot of long takes in this movie, but they're not so much showy like in Boogie Nights or Magnolia. They're much more subtle. So, for example, he's not moving his camera through different environments. He's moving the camera through one environment with different setups. So for example, he does this a bunch of times in this movie where he creates several setups with each take without cutting. And so for the first scene early in the film when Plainview is met by Paul Sunday, Eli's brother, when Paul's telling him about the well in Boston. The scene starts in the doorway with Paul just the edge of his leg in frame, and we see Daniel and his partner sitting at the table. And then Paul walks into the room, and the camera follows him a little bit, and then we see the three of them sitting in the room together. And then the camera moves again, and so with this shot, PTA sets up 3 different camera angles without cutting, and I think it's like a 4-minute take.
Yeah.
And so there's a bunch of those shots sprinkled in this movie that you don't really notice it because it's happening so slowly and so subtly, but they are extremely long takes. So he took his love of long takes and made it more nuanced and subtle.
Yeah, stay on cinematography for a little bit because there's so much to talk about with There Will Be Blood. And like you said, he uses a lot of long takes in this movie. And despite this movie being 2.5 hours long, he only has 678 cuts, which means that the average shot is about 13 seconds long. And just to put that into perspective with modern filmmaking, where over the last 60, 70 years, the average time per shot, per cut in the average Hollywood film is just declining. It's down to like 4 seconds, 3 seconds. I mean, the longest shot in like Taken 2 is like 10 seconds long. It's crazy because we've talked about long takes a lot, especially on that Children of Men episode, where it's the ultimate way to experience realism because that's how we experience the real world. We don't cut, we blink our eyes and we turn. But just like you said with PTA, how he uses these long takes to make different shots with one take. And I think my other favorite example besides that is the shot where he's about to open the derrick well for the first time, and the opening shot of that scene is his hand on the railing, and then it pans up to a beautiful wide of the entire town looking up at him with him in an over-the-shoulder shot. And so these are scattered throughout the entire film, and they do it constantly. There's a ton of great ones at the very end in the bowling alley scene with Eli and Daniel. And by cutting less, you're getting a real sense of the story, the characters, but also the composition of the shots. And each shot in this movie is a beautiful masterpiece aesthetically. I mean, each one could be a photo and put in a museum. They're so beautiful.
And there's so much natural lighting in this movie. They use very minimal set design and production.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest set piece is the oil derrick, the one that gets lit on fire. Besides that, we're mostly spending our time in, like, obviously that there's the train and then the bowling alley and the mansion. The mansion at the end, which we'll talk about later on, has a significance to other inspirations for the film. And then also he's just hanging around in these deserts and these wastelands and like on these cheap chairs and these little makeshift shafts. And he made a beautiful film. They did the cinematographer Elswit and him with minimal set design. Naturalistic cinematography too was important for both of these films. A lot of natural lighting, and both shot in West Texas. Lots of plains, lots of deserts.
That's the thing with a period piece like this, because this is set during the turn of the century, so it's not like there's power everywhere. So they were loyal to the boundaries of the time, and so they couldn't use lights if they wanted to be authentic. And so any night scenes that's lit with a lot of candlelight and fires, and in the daylight scenes, we're just getting light pouring in from the windows. And yeah, they're probably setting up lights outside the windows, but for the most part, when they're outside, they're not even using bounce boards most of the time. It's just they're just shooting.
And they actually shot majority of the film exteriors during magic hour, which is just a couple hours of light before sunset. And it's a beautiful lighting, obviously, but it's called magic hour because it looks the best, but also it runs away fast.
Yeah.
And PTA also believes in an always moving camera in his films. The camera's always moving, whether it's tracking, dollying, or sometimes it's on a crane, very seldomly. But
especially, the biggest one that he does most often in this movie is the slow push in on each character.
So very subtle sometimes.
The camera's always just slowly pushing into someone.
Even if you think it's frozen, it's subtle. It's very subtle. It's there. A lot of close-ups happen in this film too, and generally when you've seen a close-up in a film, it's during a lot of dialogue, but in this movie he uses these close-ups to show a lot of silence, a lot of quietness, so you can actually feel like you're there with the characters. And a lot of times it makes a lot of uneasy environments and discourse between characters, like when they're at the dinner table on the Sunday Ranch, there's the close-up dialogue, but then you have these long pauses in between, the cuts between like Daniel and Eli at that dinner table. So
this is an amazingly edited movie.
Yeah, it really
is amazing.
I mean, just that dinner scene, for example, the way they shot that scene is amazing. Where he's at the Sunday Ranch and they've found the oil and he's offering to buy the ranch, and it sets up with this wide of the table where Daniel's talking to the father, but we don't realize that he's not really in charge. And Eli's really in charge, but PTA and Ellsworth they hold this wide angle of just the entire table. And then when Daniel finally realizes that Eli's the one who's in control, we just do close-ups of them back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. And he's able to translate the power dynamics going on in a scene with his camera work and with the patience of the filmmaking. And in terms of, like you said, just letting beats and pauses play out, he understands when you have someone like Daniel Day-Lewis acting in your movie, all you have to do is just run the camera and just capture everything he's doing, because he's such a genius and such a brilliant artist. A lot of people would be surprised if they knew just how much improvisation he does in his movies. And when you have someone like that who never wastes a frame of film for you, you just hold on him and let him do his thing.
And ideas and staying in character. It's incredible how he does it, and just like the ideas he comes with, and then you see what was chosen for the films, because he probably tries a lot of different stuff. And there's an awesome scene of them when they're having the steak. He's having the steak with HW in the bar, and he actually breaks character kind of, or they all laugh on set. But it's actually really cool because the kid who plays HW doesn't break character until he laughs.
Yeah. And so the thing about method acting with Daniel Day-Lewis is, yes, he's a method actor, but it's not like he doesn't know that there's a movie being filmed. You know what I mean? People think like, oh, he's Daniel Plainview or he's Abe Lincoln. Like, how do you direct him in a movie? Like, is he confused by all the tech gear and technology around him? But what he's doing is he is inhabiting the character in terms of like spiritually and mentally and physically. But he knows that he's making a movie, and he knows that he's acting in each scene. So it's not so they direct him as the character, like Spielberg would text him and text him as Abe Lincoln. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's still like talking on the phone and texting these filmmakers in character still, but he still understands that what he's doing. It's not like he's lost his mind in the character. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So his method acting, I think, it's a little blown out of proportion. I think it gets a lot more press than it really needs. And the thing with his method acting is people like to say it's pretentious and like he's like being very smug, but it's like he's not the one who likes to talk about it. It's everyone else talks about him being an obsessive method actor. I'm sure he never wants to talk about it. And also, it's his process. You know what I mean? It's how he gets to wherever he needs to get to. The only way he can do it is if for each role he needs 2 years to prep to become this character. And that's just that's how he does it. You know what I mean?
I mean, he chooses his roles very scarcely. I mean, he's already retired, but before that, he would pick a role like every 4 or 5 years, or whenever PTA has a role for him every 5 years.
Yeah.
And that gives him time to obviously shut it down and live his normal life, because he's a very simple man. You know, he's not a A-list actor who like goes out partying and loves the spotlight. And whenever he does, you see interviews of him talking about method acting. It's not for him a pretentious thing. Again, like you said, it's his process, and for him it's more than that. To him it's like living out life or seeing the world through other perspectives that just fascinates him so much.
Yeah, I'm not sure he even watches the movies after they're made.
I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't. I mean, it's like Johnny Depp.
It's the experience.
Yeah.
But
I think just for him, it's just the act of being somebody else is just really appealing to him in a way, and it's why he's probably the most skilled actor to ever do it. I mean, I think Denzel's number one all time, but like in terms of skill wise, it's Daniel Day-Lewis, no contest.
Daniel Day-Lewis has this, I think, why he's so good is because he has this obsessive quality to his work, and it's not just acting. This guy has actually practiced different trades other than acting. For example, after he retired for this first time as an actor, he became a cobbler in Italy, and he was a cobbler for like 4 years making shoes. And he apprenticed with the Italy's most renowned cobbler for a couple of years, and then he started making his own shoes with his own company. And he did the same thing when he prepped for Phantom Thread. He apprenticed with a costume designer for the New York Ballet. I can't remember what it's called, the ballet company there. And he apprenticed there with this costume designer for over a year. Just as his assistant and apprentice, learning everything he can about the craft. And for example, like Last of the Mohicans, he learned how to hunt, how to fire that rifle, how to live off the land. And when he has a goal in mind, he just becomes obsessive until he becomes a master of whatever the craft or practice is. And that's a testament. That's why his acting is so good, because he just commits wholeheartedly with every bit of him into whatever he's doing.
And he created the most interesting character, I think, in the history of cinema with Daniel Plainview. Possibly, again, the most like fleshed out character in cinema history. And PTA wrote the character specifically for Daniel Day-Lewis, although he had never met him at the time. and they eventually met up in New York, and they discussed it over a couple of months, getting to know each other, and then they decided to finally make the movie. And so PTA went off to finish the script in LA, and then Daniel Day went back to Ireland to create the character. So he spent months and months creating Daniel Plainview. And to build the character, obviously he read Oil, but again, it's just a loose interpretation of the story in the book. But he really got a sense of the character, what he would by reading actual letters from oil prospectors and oil men from the 19th and 20th century who would send these letters to their family. So he read those letters to understand how they talk, understand how they live their lives, and how they talk and worked. And he did a lot of research too, and he learned how Los Angeles actually used to be covered by oil derricks everywhere. And these oil workers, they lived in these little houses that were next door to the oil derricks. They'd wake up and say bye to their family, and they just walk over to the oil derricks and do their works.
It's like a coal town.
Yeah, and so like L.A. was ruled by oil derricks, the entire landscape, which is insane. And so that's how the city was built on so much wealth.
Well, also the entire country was ruled by oil. Oil was and still is, arguably the most important resource ever since it was found. And whoever could monopolize the most oil property became extremely wealthy. And actually one of the companies in this movie, Standard Oil, was a real company, and they became so successful. They were broken up by the Senate because they were monopolized across the country. And off of after they were broken up by the government, Exxon, what are the companies? Sunco, all these oil companies, they were broke. They were remnants of the Standard Oil Company because it was so massive. And Daniel Plainview is a representation of the capitalist nature of the turn of the century, where this was a new resource that was being discovered all over the place. No one knew where it all was, and so they were just searching for it across the country. In California, like you said, it ended up being one of the hot spots of the country for oil, and then whoever could get their hands on it first got the power.
And according to PTA, Daniel Plainview is loosely based on three characters. One of them is actually a real oil tycoon, which I'll talk about last. And the first character PTA based him off of is actually Count Dracula. And just think of the opening of the film where it opens with Plainview in the darkness of this hole in this tunnel. He's away from sunlight and obsessively craves oil, like blood. Vampires crave blood, because obviously the oil represents blood in the film. And his enemy is also a preacher or a vessel for God, despite being a false prophet, obviously. The second character he based him off is J. Arnold Ross, who is the character in the book Oil, obviously. And the entire film, again, loosely based off that. Familiar elements include the quail hunting on the Sunday Ranch. The character in Evangelist Eli is also in the book, too. And again, like you said, it's mostly about H.W. and his perspective.
Yeah.
The final inspiration for the character was real-life oil tycoon Edward Deveney. They have similar histories and backgrounds, he and Daniel Plainview. And actually, the mansion at the end of the film that Daniel Plainview lives in, and after he achieved all this wealth and success, is actually Deveney's mansion.
And that mansion's actually been used in a ton of movie productions. You would recognize it in a ton of different films.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and in terms of Daniel Day-Lewis's inspiration, his main inspiration for the voice of Daniel Plainview was the great director John Huston, who made a lot of westerns in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And John Huston is hands down one of the best American film directors of all time. He helped shape the way you would make films outside of the 40s and 50s. He became one of the most prominent voices in filmmaking for a long time, and he has this very specific kind of voice in the way he talks. And when he spoke, his words would just trail off for a little bit, and they would kind of like not end. And if you listen, there's a lot of video of him online on YouTube. Check out John Huston, like an interview or something, and then watch Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood. And it is very much a impersonation of John Huston in a way.
Yeah, and I love this character because, to me, a lot of this film and this character, it's kind of like a person and a man who sold his soul to the devil for success, and with that, he has sacrifices he has to give up. And, for example, the film opens up with this man, we don't know who he is yet, just in the bottom of this tunnel in darkness by himself, and you can tell he's probably been digging these holes for years. It's 1898. He looks like he's exhausted. He's skinny. He has no help. He probably can't afford help. He probably put everything he has, all of his money, into this trip, into this voyage, into a desert of nowhere, of just this rocky tundra, and it's dark, and And then obviously it's an amazing opening scene where you mentioned earlier, it's 15 minutes, no dialogue.
Yeah.
No dialogue at all.
Yeah, and this opening is terrific because, like you said, he's very skinny and weathered, so he's probably been doing this for a while. And also, he must have been trying all sorts of different avenues of making money before this, and now he's on his own. So I think he's kind of relatively new at digging for oil because he has no one with him, and obviously he's never made a dime off of it. And this opening sequence is absolutely incredible and revolutionary in terms of modern cinema, because it's kind of like its own movie in itself, where Daniel Plainview is digging and then he finds gold, but then as he's climbing out, he falls down the hole and breaks his leg, and he's in the middle of the desert, and he has to literally crawl out of the desert. And you can make a movie on its own just with this story. It would be a movie.
Because it's actually Silver, by the way.
Silver,
I know someone's going to get upset in the comments.
Silver.
Yeah, because like we just said, he's probably been doing this for years. He breaks his leg, drags himself out, and then you just watch Daniel Plainview start to drag himself through this rocky, dry terrain. And what PTA and Ellsworth do is they just pan the camera up with Johnny Greenwood's eerie high-string score, and we just see this rocky, small, hilly mountain terrain, and you can only imagine how many miles and how many hours did he have to go through to get to that little blacksmith where he's getting his silver weighed and money for it. And again, this is what I mean by selling your soul to the devil, or it's not without sacrifice. This man didn't just become wealthy because he's an asshole and a greedy person. He went through hell. He crawled with a broken leg through who knows what. Like, how many people could have done that? It also gives him kind of some sort of value as someone who did something amazing and so challenging, and it's like a sense of pride, and also it gives him sort of value as a character for an audience.
Exactly, because if you see this character and he is able to accomplish that, then whatever he does for the rest of the movie, you can believe it, no matter what, no matter how challenging or how questionable or crazy it is, you'll believe that this character can do it because of what he did in the opening sequence of getting out of the desert with a broken leg.
And like you said, you could make a movie about that. Yeah. You could, but you don't have to. PTA is like, I don't have to do that. Here's just this shot, and then we're going to cut to him chilling with a brace, watching these guys check out his silver.
With a rifle.
Yeah, and just has this like smirk on his face and doesn't even care that he broke his leg.
Yeah, and it's a great scene because this is him starting out, because after this he has enough money from the silver to fund his own dig with other people working for him. This is where he is able to finally strike gold by striking an oil well, and it's his first well. And it's also a very important moment because it's when we are introduced to his eventual adoptive son, H.W., who he adopts out of his own greed. Because the thing with Daniel Plainview is one of the main themes of this movie, I think, is that people may not relate to or think of is family. And family actually is very important to Daniel, but he has like this strange relationship with the idea of family because he adopts this orphaned son, this orphaned boy, as a way to help sell himself as an oil man, because what he's doing is he's going to landowner, asking to buy their property, and he thinks it will be easier to sell himself if he has a young boy with him, with the illusion that his wife died in childbirth, and he tells the story to people when he's offering to buy their land. And so he adopts this boy and creates a family for himself out of pure business motivation and motivated purely by money. But then also, family has very important elements in this film in terms of when H.W. gets older and there's that accident and he goes deaf from the accident of the oil well. Once Daniel can't speak to the boy or hold this kind of like fatherly power over the boy, because Daniel's strength is his speech. I think he's able to convince anyone of anything. He's a great salesman, and so when he can't talk to the HW anymore, he abandons him. He sends him away. And then also when Tilford, near the end of the film, when he's selling his oil wells to Tilford, and Telford says, you should retire and spend time with your son. After this mention of trying to tell him how to be a father, Daniel threatens to kill him. Very abrupt, irrational way to react to someone giving you familial advice. And then also he murders Henry, who was pretending to be his own brother, and then weeps when he finds his brother's diary because his brother who had died earlier, he lost that connection of a brother he could have had, and so he has very passionate emotions and driving motivations towards family, but he also can't help from pushing his family away in certain ways.
Yeah, and just like how he pushes HW away at the end, and again, he didn't even know he had a brother, but that's like the kind of person that Daniel Plainview is he's just motivated on one thing, and that's his success and his wealth and being the most powerful person everywhere and being in control of everything. Like, it's number one for him is wealth and power, but also control, and that's what a lot of this movie is about, because it's really telling when they find out that they have this ocean of oil underneath them, and he tells his associate, he's like, "Why are you looking so grumpy for? There's an ocean of oil below us, and only I can get at it." So he's all about control for himself. And I think, again, like you just said, how he can't control HW because he can't hear him, so that's why he pushes him away.
Yeah, exactly. And Daniel is also a master manipulator and a master liar, because he's able to lie to Eli and his father to buy the land, as he tells them that he wants to buy the land to give his son a dry climate to live in because he's sick. Whereas, like we all know that he wants the land to drill the oil underneath it, and then he plays coy, saying like, "Oh, he knows people in the oil industry, and he can maybe see if he can muster up like a small crew or something." And then also he lies to the people he purchases land from by saying that HW is his real son and that his wife died in childbirth as a way to help sell himself, like we said earlier. And he also lies in his big monologues to towns. For example, in the big monologue when he's speaking to the residents of Little Boston, he tells them that he's going to build a school, he's going to build farmland with crops to grow wheat so that everyone can have bread. He's going to build water wells everywhere, irrigation. So he's promising he promises all these townsfolk these incredible improvements on their land as a way to get them to agree to let him purchase the land, when ultimately he never had any intentions of doing these things, because all he wanted was to get their land from them. He doesn't care about people. All he cares about is what he can get from people. And his lust for power, it ultimately makes him unhinged and even disturbed in a lot of ways, because he reveals later in the film when he's with Henry that he wants to make enough money to get away from people. That's his intention.
He hates people. He has this anger towards them. He sees nothing in common with them. He even talks about them like they're different species of animal or being. And again, this is a person, he has no friends. He has no lovers, no partners. He's got this adopted son that, again, he just uses as a prop basically to buy land. We don't know where he comes from. He doesn't really contact anyone unless it's someone who works for him. He even lies to the other oil prospector. He tells him to go east, which is a total lie. Because again, he tells Henry he wants no one else to succeed. He wants to be the only person that succeeds.
Not even his own son. When HW grows up and wants to start his own company, he ends up viewing his son as a competitor. And this is ultimately how they become estranged at the end of the film. And the ironic thing about Daniel is that after the course of the film, he acquires everything he wants. He acquires all the oil he can get his hands on, and he accumulates a great amount of wealth, and he does buy an estate to get away from people. And so he finally gets everything he wants, but then how does he spend his days? Firing a rifle at his furniture in his hallway. He's just he falls into madness because of his obsessive desire for power and for wealth and for oil. It drives him crazy, and he doesn't know what to do with himself. He doesn't know what to do with himself when the motivations to get oil and power are gone. When he has everything he wants, he doesn't know how to live.
I think it's maybe not so much that. I think it's like he tells his half-brother, fake half-brother, that he hates everyone. I think maybe he even hates himself too, because he obviously spends all of his time just drinking and doing self-destructive behaviors. And again, this is a person who I like to say sold his soul to the devil to get fortune and success. And so I think Daniel, he might even hate himself as much as he hates everybody else.
Yeah, and I think you're right. He's very self-destructive, and the final line of the film I really love is after he kills Eli, he says, "I'm finished." He's saying that he is finished because he got everything he wanted, and then he pushed his son away, his final piece of family, so now he's alone. And then he killed his greatest adversary, Eli, And so there's nothing left to do. He really is just finished with his life.
Speaking of Eli, want to talk about him?
Yeah, I would love to.
So Eli, I love this character, and I think Paul Dano is phenomenal in this movie. Obviously, it's so hard to even just act alongside Daniel Day-Lewis, I'm sure, but I think he does a really great job. And I think he probably was a snub not getting an Oscar nomination for this role because he's really good in it. And I think he's a lot more similar to Daniel than he would ever want to admit, or than PTA shows you in the first half of the film, probably, because as Daniel grows in power and strength from the money, land, and oil, Eli's also growing in strength, in spiritual strength, from consuming basically like the souls of his followers in a way and getting their emotional support. And also, as much as Daniel is bleeding the land dry, Eli tries to siphon as much money from Daniel. So they're both con men in a way, because he's obviously a false prophet, and his goal basically is to extract money from Plainview, because he's basically letting him do this because he wants money as well. But he uses the guise of religion and his preaching as his mean of finding success and fame.
Yeah, you're almost completely right, because you got to add on to that Eli is a reflection of Daniel. They're the same person. And like you said, Daniel is an oil man and Eli is a man of God. And Daniel's trying to gather as much oil as possible to gain his power, and then Eli is trying to gather as many followers of faith to get his power, because his church can only grow in power with a larger congregation to donate money. And so they both are trying to gather as much power as possible, and their storylines converge because it's conflicting with each other, where Daniel Plainview's workers are there's that accident at the oil well because the men were spending too much time at the church. And so there's this back and forth where they're kind of warring with each other for the power of the townspeople. You know what I mean? And so they actually are pretty much the same character, but they have different paths that they go on and different ways of gathering their power.
Yeah, and the war starts when Daniel refuses Eli's offer to bless the well.
Yeah.
And he lets Mary instead come up and turn it on.
I love that
and
scene.
it's a great scene,
Yeah.
because you can see in Eli's eyes that he just became an arch nemesis of Daniel Plainview, and he'll do everything he can to bring him down.
Yeah.
And just to keep going on what you said, how they're the same character, I think one of my favorite back-to-back shots in the film, which shows that, is Daniel is just spending a day. He's sitting down on a chair, and the oil derrick's just pulling oil up, and then he looks over at Eli's church, the Church of the Third Revelation.
Yeah.
And he pulls out a little telescope, and he's kind of like mumbling to himself and just like sitting there. And then he looks through his telescope at the church, and inside the church it's being built. But Eli, he's also just kind of mumbling to himself and like moving around. So again, they are counterparts and also very similar characters.
Yeah. And in terms of Paul Dano, he did a great job with this movie. I disagree with you. I don't think he was good enough to get a nomination in this film, but it's not his fault. There's actually a really great story of how he was cast in this movie, because Paul Dano was actually a last-minute casting addition to play Eli in the film, because originally Paul Dano had already been cast to play the Paul Sunday, the first one we see, who offers the information about Little Boston to Daniel Plainview. That was supposed to be his only scene in the movie. He was just going to play Paul Sunday, just this one scene, and then that's it. But what happened was the actor who was cast as Eli Sunday, stories aren't really clear about what happened, if he was fired or he left the project, but there was something wrong with the production with him in the role. I can't remember the actor's name, but he left the project after, I think, 4 days of filming as Paul Sunday. And so since they're in the middle of production, like, they need an actor to fill the spot to play Paul Sunday, because what are they going to do? And so Paul Thomas Anderson asked Paul Dano, could you take on this other role and be Paul Sunday as well? And Paul Dano agreed. And so Paul Thomas Anderson changed the script, whereas these brothers became identical twins, to help explain why the same actor is playing them. So they weren't originally twins when they started filming. And so Paul Dano only had 4 days of prep before his first scene as Eli Sunday. And so he did a great job, but he had no time to prepare for this role. You know what I mean? I'm sure he was learning his lines like the night before his scenes.
Yeah, especially because he has a lot of long monologues and emotional scenes.
But he still did a great job, though.
That's really smart from PT. I never heard that story. I had no idea. That's really cool because I love the aspect of them being identical twins, because when we first obviously meet Paul Sunday and he's offering the $500 cash for information, and then when we finally get to the Sunday ranch and then Mary brings them the goat's milk, and then they're on their way. And then while they're setting up their tent, Eli Sunday comes over to them, and it's obviously it's Paul. It looks just like Paul at Sunday.
And you can see Daniel Day-Lewis's reaction is like, what?
Because the first time I saw this movie, I spent like the next hour, I would say, are they twins? Is this all like a giant ruse that Eli did just to get some cash over his father's head, just to get a quick funding for his church? But then we don't find out until like an hour and a half in the film that they're actually brothers, when Eli is castrating his father at the dinner table after Daniel just shoved him in all the mud. Yeah. When he talks about his dumb brother.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the reason for that is because Paul Thomas Anderson doesn't want to over-explain things. He'd rather you figure them out as the film goes along and progresses.
And I just think it adds a very cool element to the story and the characters.
Exactly. And Eli becomes Daniel's main adversary in the film because he grows in power by using the word of God, and it becomes an antagonist to Daniel. And like you said, he's trying to milk as much money from Daniel as possible. And they butt heads a few times. And one of my favorite scenes is the scene where Daniel and his some of his men are meeting, and they have this giant ocean of oil. They have this giant ocean of oil just in the valley because there's nowhere for them to put it. So they're just dumping it into this huge like lake of oil in the middle of the valley. And it's an amazing moment where Eli confronts Daniel, demanding the money that he promised him when he first bought the land, the $5,000 for his church, which Daniel agreed to. And this is after H.W. lost his hearing, and then Daniel just physically assaults Eli, throws him into the oil, and then
in front of other people,
and just starts smacking him around, saying like, "How are you? If you're such a prophet and a man of God, why don't you make my son hear again?" So he's calling him out for his lack of for his real self not being a true like religious figure. And this is the moment where Daniel, I think, finally gains power over Eli.
Yeah, and actually that scene, I think, the opening of it has one of the most beautiful shots in the film where you're talking about that little lake of oil. They perfectly get a beautiful reflection of the sky, and the blue sky and the clouds just reflected in this dark black pit of oil. And I think the oil, it obviously wasn't real oil, but I think
it's one of the few special effect shots.
Yeah, it was. The oil was created with, I think, what is used in McDonald's chocolate milkshakes, like some
chocolate syrup.
Ugh, that's gross.
This is a lot.
That's what you put in your body. Oh my god!
And then they have their final confrontation at the end of the film, which is one of my favorite scenes in all of movies. It's an amazing scene because Daniel. It's very funny and very dark, and it's this blend of those two tones in such a brilliant way. Because it's funny because Daniel has become just like this ridiculous recluse who's kind of like, he reminds me of Howard Hughes. You know what I mean? He's like losing his mind. He's becoming unhinged. And when Eli comes to see him, he knows when Eli hints that he's having money problems, Daniel sees an opportunity where he can take advantage of him and ridicule him, and he does it immediately. And he says that line, "Are things not good for you?" And there's that iconic moment when Eli is begging Daniel to take his well in Little Boston, the bandy well. Daniel does the infamous line, "I drink your milkshake. I drink it up." It's, I think, one of the most iconic lines in the movie, and that leads to the great confrontation between them.
Yeah, I love the scene. It's the best in the movie probably. And just to talk about how you said that the way that Daniel finally gained full control over Eli was beating him in front of those people next to the oil. And then this was kind of like what Daniel did to him too. It was before the physical part with the pin, where he knows that Eli is probably broke, despite him wearing his Sunday best suit with the large cross, talking about how he's found success in radio. But and then Daniel knows, it just starts messing with him when he's talking about how because Eli wants to sell him the bandy track, the infamous bandy track, which Daniel never purchased, which was what he built the pipeline on instead. So he never actually purchased the bandy tract to get the oil underneath it. And Eli thinks that this is an opportunity for him to finally get wealth because he hasn't been successful like Daniel. And Daniel lets him go on and agrees to $100,000 signing bonus and to sell the bandy tract as an advisor for the band.
He's like, how long will it take? Won't take long.
2 weeks at most. 2 weeks. And then but there's one stipulation to the deal is that he forces Eli to admit that he's a false prophet and that God is a superstition. And he makes him recite this over and over, just like the monologue, just like how he made Daniel recite those phrases during his baptism at the church in order to build the pipeline on the bandy tract. And it's an amazing scene because this is just Daniel getting the final one-up on Eli before he kills him and beats him to
and
death.
having fun with him.
He explains drainage. Now I just drink it up. Oh, man, it hurts.
Drainage.
And so, yeah, he basically wins this struggle between him and Eli. And
I think killing him wasn't enough. He needed to ridicule him and tear him down emotionally and take away his humanity.
Yeah, and Eli, he's given into this, capitalist nature and need to be successful and greed and wealth. Whereas, like I said again, Daniel sold his soul years before that for his success and for his oil, and he accepted that. But now Eli's accepting it too late.
And then it leads to the famous confrontation where he attacks Eli with the bowling pins. It's funny but horrifying at the same time.
Oh, and also one of the best parts of the scene is where Eli constantly called himself the third revelation. Now Daniel's calling himself the third revelation. He's like, I am the third revelation because in a way he was the real prophet.
Yeah, and Daniel never believed in religion, and he always saw that Eli, because he doesn't believe in religion, he always saw Eli as a false prophet and just like a showman. And he just performs for his congregation rather than really preaching.
With your song and dance.
Yeah, that's why he says it was one goddamn hell of a show, and that's why he does, your song and dance. And then I love the ending of this movie because it doesn't have anything to do with the overall story. It doesn't have to do anything with the empire that Daniel has built, but it's just these two characters who have been clashing, and it has led to this final moment, this final confrontation. And I think that Daniel, he accomplished everything he wanted, but he's still hungry for more power. And what more power can you have than to take another person's life? And so I think that when he saw the opportunity to finally do something, he just went right for it and without hesitation killed Eli.
I told you I would eat you.
I told you I would eat you.
I'm gonna bury you underground. He says so many great lines.
My favorite line is when he lies to him and says that he paid Paul $5,000 cash in hand.
Cash in hand.
It's like he paid him $500, but he's lying just to mess with Eli.
He's got 3 wells producing $5,000 a week. He's like tapping him.
Prosperous little business. He's tapping him. It's an amazing ending, and I absolutely love this ending. It's so great. And there's so many iconic moments in this movie, and there's, like we said about the cinematography, there's a lot of great moments that are catapulted into like incredible pieces of cinema because of the cinematography. And some of my favorite shots. There's so many, but some of my favorites are there's the shot of Daniel in the ocean after he and Henry are sitting on the beach in the coast, and he goes in the water, and there we have a shot of Daniel watching him, and the camera goes half underwater and half above water, and then the underwater body portion of Daniel is gigantic, and then his head is small above water, is showing the power this man has in the situation. And in the country, this man has just gained so much power. And then also a great shot is Daniel staring at the burning oil well after his partner goes to check on HW, and Daniel's just staring like with bloodlust at the burning oil of the well. And
he's bashed in darkness, and he's also covered in oil. Doesn't even look human.
And then another great shot is before the water shot, also on the beach when he and Henry are sitting on the beach. They're both sitting beside each other, and he films it from the side, and Henry is in the foreground, and he's in the shadow because Daniel is learning that he has been lying to him about being his brother, and Daniel is sitting in the sunlight because he is in the right of the situation, and it's an amazing way to detail the dynamic of the situation. And then obviously another great shot is when Daniel's carrying HW across the land after the explosion of the well It's great music, and then I think maybe my favorite shot is the opening shot when Daniel is just hacking into the hard earth inside the hole he's dug with his pick over and over and over again, with that music building up. And I think it was such a brilliant way to open the film and really show you with just one shot who this character was.
And I want to talk real quick about blood, and how obviously the title insinuates that there's going to be blood at some point. There will be blood, and obviously oil represents blood, but this is, again, in a way, a horror film. And at some point, we're waiting on bated breath. I think the first time I watched this movie, I was just constantly waiting, like, where's the death going to come? Where's the killing going to come? And obviously, he kills the person who was pretending to be his half-brother, Henry. And this is a great character to come into Daniel's life because, again, you talked about family, and when he shows up and he knows this history of Daniel, and Daniel like makes him almost like a partner, kind of. He's there at the meetings with Standard Oil. He's kind of an essential figure in his business operation now, and a person he can actually talk to.
And also, Daniel's partner for years becomes, I think, jealous of Henry because he's asking in one scene, is Henry going with you to that state?
To Standard Oil.
Yeah, to Standard Oil. And it's like, this guy has been with Daniel for so long. And then Henry shows up, and it shows Daniel's desire for familial connections to make Henry like a full-blown partner by his side at all times.
But it's ironic because the only person who doesn't trust Henry is HW, and he lights that fire underneath his bed because he thinks there's something odd about it, and there's something off about it.
He doesn't light a fire under his bed.
Yeah, he does. He lights the trail of
It's in the center of the room.
Well, it shows up like right under him.
No, it's in the center of the room.
But he's doing it while he's going through the guy's things, and he lights the fire right at him to wake him up.
I disagree. I don't think that's what he's doing.
Well, I see that. Well, for me, I see that as HW just doesn't like this guy for some reason.
I saw that as HW just acting out because he can't hear anything, and he's just rebelling in some way, and
he's jealous of.
He wants to cause destruction.
Maybe
or
he's
something.
jealous of Henry because there's scenes where he's like looking at Henry oddly. Yeah,
but the fire's not like under his bed. It's in the center.
And then we have the great journey of Henry and Daniel after he strikes that deal with Union Oil for the pipeline instead of with Standard Oil just buying out all of his wells, and then they go through the Bandy tract and they start prospecting and surveying the land for the pipeline without even getting permission. And it's a great score from John Greenwood here, and then amazing shots, cinematography of these beautiful wide shots of this country and landscape. And then this is where we find out that Henry is a liar, and Daniel's talking about the memories of their childhood, and Henry seems to not
take them to the Peachtree Dance.
Take them to the
liquor them liquored up. Get them liquored up and take them to the Peachtree Dance.
But Henry doesn't seem to understand the kind of joke that he's telling because he should know what the Peachtree Dance is if he's from the same place. And when Henry doesn't react, this causes Daniel to question their blood relation. They have that amazing shot where he kind of just looks at Henry again, and this is when he's swimming in the ocean, staring at him, and then watching him at the brothel.
And I also think that's the final catalyst for him understanding that Henry's not his real brother, because I think the first sign is that Henry is so much different from Daniel, because Daniel is defined by his successes and his drive and his will to overcome any obstacle, whereas Henry has been defined his whole life by failure and crime. And so I think that Daniel initially, before this moment, also had reservations because of how different of a person this guy is from himself.
And this is the only person he's ever opened up to, talking about his hate for people and his anger. Yeah. And Henry says he doesn't have any of that, but Daniel says that, well, if it's in me, it's in you.
Yeah.
But they're so polar opposite.
So he doesn't recognize anything in this guy.
And then Daniel wakes him up with the gun and asks him to name that farm in their hometown, which he can't. And then obviously Daniel shoots him, and he digs a hole and buries him. And this is the first instance of the blood that he sacrifices. Again, this is the man who sold his soul.
And also a moment here that I really love is that when he digs the hole, water starts forming in the bottom, and it because it's nighttime, it kind of looks like oil. So it kind of looks like he's burying Henry in oil.
Yeah, and I bet you that Daniel Day-Lewis is such a method actor that he really did this to somebody.
He really killed the actor. He's like, Paul, why don't I just shoot him with the real gun? But again, this movie, I think ultimately the main theme of this movie is power, and it's all these situations and moments and where Daniel is confronted with obstacles or other characters that jeopardize his power, and then he is always able to overcome whatever is brought up to take power in whatever situation it is. And like this, for this example, he finds out that this man has been lying to him, which means that the man had power the whole time because Henry was using Daniel. So Daniel didn't have the power in the situation. So when he discovers this, he kills him to take the power back. So he's always taking power in any situation he can.
Power and control.
Yeah.
We could obviously talk about There Will Be Blood for hours, so let's just move on to some fun facts, and then we'll move on to No Country. And I think my favorite fact about this film, which actually relates to No Country for Old Men, is they were both filming in West Texas in a lot of the scenes, and when the greatest set piece of the oil derrick exploding with oil and the giant black smoke of the fire is in the sky in There Will Be Blood, this actually forced No Country for Old Men to shut down production for a day because they could actually see this black cloud of smoke in the sky.
Oh, no way. Dylan Frazier, who plays Daniel's son H.W. in the film, the film crew and the casting directors, they were searching for a young boy that could fit this character perfectly, and they found this kid Dylan at a local school who knew how to hunt, and he was very athletic, and he seemed to be a perfect fit for this role. But what happened was his mother had never heard of Daniel Day-Lewis, not a big movie fan, so she watched the film Gangs of New York, and she was terrified of Daniel Day-Lewis and did not want her son anywhere near him, afraid that he was actually like a horrible person in real life. And then the producers heard about this and immediately sent them the film Age of Innocence, this Martin Scorsese film, which is a period piece romance with Daniel Day-Lewis as a supporting character with Michelle Pfeiffer, and he's very gentlemanly and kind and loving in that movie. So they sent her that movie to watch. Like, oh, he's not evil. He's not Bill the Butcher. Like, here's him being very nice and gentlemanly and loving. And then after she saw this film, she agreed to let her son act with Daniel Day-Lewis in the scenes.
If you like our podcast and our content and want to help support us, the best thing you can do is share us with your movie friends or your friends in general. Let them know that there's an awesome movie program for people out there because we're growing mostly word of mouth thanks to all of you. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find us. Hit the notification bell. Leaving those 5-star reviews is so helpful, and we love to read those 5-star reviews. I look at them all the time. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, it's great.
Except for those one stars. And support us monthly on patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Patrons get special perks like personalized messages, personalized video messages, and top-tier patrons get a monthly shout-out on the podcast. No Country for Old Men, released in 2007, directed by Ethan and Joel Coen. Written by Ethan and Joel Coen, based on the book No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. This film stars Javier Bardem, Tommy Lee Jones, Josh Brolin, Woody Harrelson, and Kelly MacDonald. This movie had a budget of $25 million and a worldwide box office of $171 million. After discovering a drug deal gone wrong and more than $2 million in cash, local hunter and veteran Llewellyn Moss runs with the money but is chased by a deranged killer while an old sheriff tries to save him.
Like we said earlier, No Country has a lot in common with There Will Be Blood, but it also has a lot of differences. Like, this film is a Western in the most classic sense of the word. It's just set not in the typical period of Western films. It's set in, was it the 60s?
I think it's 70s, Vietnam.
70s, and so it takes the traditional Western outlaw stories and puts it into a more contemporary setting, which I really love. And also, this film has a depiction of one of the greatest villains we've ever seen in cinema.
Yeah, again, best book adaptation I've ever seen in terms of being faithful to the novel, the dialogue, a lot of it's verbatim again, effectively bringing a new meaning and depth to the dialogue, though, with these actors. And when we're talking about the story and the directors, the Coen Brothers, also assume we're talking about Cormac McCarthy for writing this story and writing these incredible characters. So I think just assume we're talking about Cormac at the same time. Amazing author. This guy's written some of the best American modern literature, like Blood Meridian. I love that book. The Road's fantastic, and the attention to detail in this movie is absurd. And these are great filmmakers. Like little things like worn out soles on the boots of the man who bleeds out against that tree, because obviously those boots aren't meant for the desert climate. They also have an incredible knack and genius skill of casting like local residents who feel like you're in that community when you see them. Like, they're not actors. They're not like perfect specimens who moved to LA in pursuit of acting. These are real people in real lives and real communities, and their ability to cast people like that just adds so much depth and realism to the story.
And also to the dialogue, because they're able, since they live in those environments and they're locals, they have the dialect perfect. And so no one's acting trying to get the dialect and the accent right. These people already speak with the accent, so it takes you more into the realism of the movie itself.
And the Coen Brothers, a lot of people might not know this, they also edit all of their films, and they have incredible pacing, specifically in this film.
They use a pseudonym.
Yeah, it's
Janes or something.
Yeah, it's some funny name, but they edit all their movies, and this movie is a slow-paced thriller, and not quite in long takes like there were in There Will Be Blood, but again, great editing in this movie. And overall, this movie, when I watch it, a lot of it's about fate versus chance. Obviously, this evil character of Anton Chigurh operates on this level of fate and introducing himself into people's lives and evil and giving them basically 50-50 shots at life. Regret also, like Tommy Lee Jones' character, the sheriff, Ed Tom, he regrets not being able to help Llewellyn in the end. Greed and chance, taking a chance by grabbing that satchel of money and running. And also evil. In this movie, it focuses on this evil character and how it's new to this world and this fast-changing environment, this fast-changing world where these old men don't recognize the world they live in anymore.
And this film also has a very similar opening to There Will Be Blood, where it's very minimal dialogue for the first 15 minutes. And first it starts with a narration by Tommy Lee Jones, but after that, it shows Anton Chigurh in a couple of scenes where first he is arrested and then he kills the deputy, and then he steals someone's car. And it's an amazing way to show you who this character is, how capable he is, how ruthless he is, how sociopathic he is, because when he chokes the deputy and the man dies, he seems to exhale in pleasure once it's done. Javier Bardem has like this smirk on his face when he's done with his deed. And also that scene, like you said, the Coen Brothers and their attention to detail. I think one of the most amazing shots of this movie is that shot when he's strangling the deputy, and you see it's something you've never seen in a movie before, but would probably happen, and it's something that's probably seen in a lot of crime scenes, which is scuff marks, because obviously these two are struggling on the tile floor, and there are scuff marks all over the place because it's such a violent scene. And I just think that's something I've never seen in a movie before, and the first time I saw this scene, I was like blown away by that detail.
In the film before that, yeah, like you said, it opens up with Tommy Lee Jones' character, Sheriff Ed Tom Bell, and he gives these sporadic voiceovers, and he bookends the movie with them. In the first one, he's talking about how he sent a teenager to the electric chair for killing his 14-year-old girlfriend. And a lot of people argued that it was a crime of passion. He's a kid and he should have a shot at life. But Ed tells how when he talked to the boy that he was just a killer, and that if he got out, he'd do it again, and he'd just keep killing. And he knew he was going to hell. Be there in 15 minutes. And Ed tells another story throughout the film, another one of this couple who run a hotel, and they kill people in the residence, and they sell all their goods, and they just bury them in the yard. And again, a major theme of the film is he doesn't recognize the world he's in anymore. Too much time has passed, and the 20th century, the world was changing fast, rapidly. Every year was different. And they talk about how they see these kids with green hair and bones. Not that there's anything wrong with having green hair and bones in your nose, but again, these older generations of people who've been around for 60, 70 years, they don't recognize where they are anymore.
So you're absolutely right in that point, but I think that Ed Tom is actually mistaken with how he's looking at things and his perspective of the world, because in his eye, and he says it, his storyline is basically, like you said, he's having trouble understanding the world now, and especially when he comes up against Anton Chigurh and also those stories you mentioned, it seems as though he doesn't understand the evil that's happening in the world, and it seems like someone like him, he's just not cut out for it anymore because it's new evil. But ultimately, he's mistaken, because when he speaks to his brother at the end of the film, his brother tells him this is nothing new. He tells that story about the Native American attack on their family member's home. And what he's saying is that there's always been evil in the world. there have always been men like Anton Chigurh, and there have always been killers like that couple and that young teenager in the other story. And the world isn't changing. It's just that maybe Ed Tom isn't cut out for handling evil anymore, because the evil has always been in mankind's history throughout all of time. There's always been evil, and there's always been death, and there's always been killing. And Anton Chigurh is nothing new. I think that Ed Tom just is mistakenly viewing it as the world is changing, but really it's not.
And yeah, exactly. I
think
really like that.
He's changing, which is why his perspective thinks that the world is changing, because Ed Tom has changed.
I think you're right. And these stories that he tells about these killers, they really set up this character of Anton Chigurh, who's a completely evil man. It's kind of like amazing how horrible of a villain he is. And one of the best villains we've ever had the privilege of seeing on screen. And he's so interesting, and Javier Bardem knocks this role out of the park. You got the Oscar for it, well-deservedly so. And I know the Coen Brothers cast him because he doesn't speak English very well, which he told them. I mean, he doesn't like violence, which he told them. And these are some of the reasons why they cast him, because he's such a talented actor. And he's just as smart as he is psychotic. He's a maniac. He ties up all loose ends he comes across, which is why he lives his life as a ghost in this ether of criminality. But he's also a firm believer in chance and fate, and he plays that coin game, which for him is a way to justify his desire to kill people, because he wants to kill people. You know he does, but he uses this coin flip as a way to say, it's not me, it's your decision. I just came here just like this coin came here. It's up to you. When he doesn't have to introduce this coin, doesn't have to introduce this situation.
Well, so you're right, but it's not anyone's decision. What he's doing is, when he's doing the coin flip, he's taking the responsibility out of his hands, because he does the coin flip with people that don't deserve to die. So like that man in the gas station, the clerk, and then Carla Jean at the end of the film, he does the coin flips with them because they aren't parts of his duty or his job. But what happens is that man in the gas station noticed that his plates are from Dallas, so then he asks him a question, which is obviously Anton's a very smart man, and he should not carry. He doesn't want to leave any loose ends. So a witness who saw that someone from Dallas came could drive people to Dallas investigating the killing. So it makes him put the man up for death, because he doesn't deserve to die, but he's put himself in the situation. And to absolve himself of the responsibility of choosing whether or not to kill the man, he lets fate decide. So that way it's not Anton's responsibility anymore. It's just fate's responsibility. Yeah, he does the same thing with Carla Jean, where he promised Llewellyn he would kill her, but rather than, since she doesn't deserve to die, he's going to leave it up to fate to decide whether she dies or lives. And Anton lives by this strict moral code. It's like the Harvey Dent Two-Face moral code of right and wrong. It's not so much about justice, but more about taking the decision out of killing someone.
What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss? It's an amazing dialogue by Cormac McCarthy and then interpreted by the Coen Brothers. And again, yeah, he's very intelligent. He ties up loose ends. And some other examples of his very smart high intellect is testing out that motel room to prepare for breaking into the other one that he thinks that Llewellyn is in. And
yeah.
He examines the flaws of the rooms where people could hide.
He bursts in to see, like, if I burst in and turn on the light, what's it look like?
So he plays things out, and it seems like he's been in every situation he's been in a dozen times. Like, it seems like he's been in handcuffs a dozen times, knows how to get out. It seems like he's been injured multiple times and has had to tend to his wounds before multiple times.
And also someone who's been as successful in that job for as long as he probably has. He's only survived this long because of how astute and intelligent he is in preparation as well.
And he has no emotions. He has no empathy. He's basically not human. He's like the Terminator in a way. And people are just pawns to him. He's also smart about who he kills, taking no chances ever with witnesses. Like when he's asking Llewellyn's trailer manager where Llewellyn works, and she won't give him an answer, and you can tell he's about to kill her.
Yeah.
But then he hears a toilet flush, so then he looks at the toilet flush, then he just leaves.
So he's aware of when it would be a bad decision to try and kill someone. So right there, he could have killed the woman if she was alone pretty easily, but if there's another person, that's a variable that he's not prepared for. So he's only willing to kill and carry out these acts when he feels that he's fully prepared and ready for them.
And his method of killing is also virtually untraceable, using that gas tank with the cattle stun gun. No one knows what it is. They think it's a bullet, but there are no bullets inside the heads or the bodies. And Carson Wells, the character played by Woody Harrelson, compares him to the bubonic plague, and you can really get a sense of the monster that this person is. And again, very few people have even seen him alive besides Carson Wells.
Yeah, and this is an unbelievable performance, and I don't think many actors could have done what Javier did. And obviously, it catapulted him to fame in America, but he was already a big star in Spain. He was probably the most prominent actor in Spain at the time. And with this performance, he actually became the first actor to ever win the Best Supporting Actor at the Academy Awards, the Screen Actors Guild, the BAFTAs, the Golden Globes, and the Critics' Choice Awards. It had never been done before, like a clean sweep for supporting actor for the awards season. And I mean, he deserves every accolade he got for this movie. And one of my favorite aspects to the character is just the look of him, especially the hair. And the hair, it's just like this weird bob haircut. You know what I mean? And the Coens found a photo. They were looking through photo books of Texas, a bunch of photo books, and they were in a photo book of a brothel from like the 1950s or 60s. And in one of the photos, they saw this man with this very strange haircut, like this bob haircut, and it just looked strange on a man at that time period. And so they decided that would be the hair for Anton Chigurh in the film. And when they cut Javier's hair like that, they thought it was perfect. Although Javier Bardem said it was awful because when they were off set and like him and Brolin would go out drinking or something, he's like, no matter what I did with the hair, I could never make it look good. And so he was like, I'm never going to get laid while I'm making this movie.
And the Coen Brothers are like, yes, that's exactly what we want, because we want it to look creepy. And he's a very menacing person, and not just the hair, the eyes, and the look in his eyes at all times. It looks like he has no soul.
Yeah.
You can't really tell where he's from. You can assume he's probably from Mexico because we're talking about on the border.
Yeah.
He definitely has an accent. And that smile, the like evil, soulless smile he gives, because he just is having so much fun. And also, again, I compare him a lot to the Terminator, because there's a scenes where he's looking for the cash and he's using the transponder, and he's just driving endlessly in the night. You can assume this guy hasn't slept in days, because that's all he's doing. He's not sleeping, he's not eating, he's not doing anything but looking for that money.
Yeah, this job is what he's perfectly suited for, and he even calls himself the perfect tool, because when he finds out that his employer sent several different parties looking for the money, after he killed him, he told the accountant that it was a mistake, because all you have to do is just send the one perfect tool, which is him. And according to an article by Business Insider, a group of psychiatrists studied 400 movies, and in these movies they identified 126 psychopathic characters throughout film, and they chose Javier Bardem's character of Anton Chigurh as being the most clinically accurate portrayal of a psychopath.
Another clever thing that he does when he's about to kill people is he takes his shoes off, so he just walks with his socks because you can't hear his steps.
It's something I've always wanted to see in a movie.
Yeah, because it makes total sense.
If I'm going to kill someone, I'm going to take off my shoes so they don't hear me.
Especially with the hardwood floors. He's always aware of his feet, and like he's always avoiding blood puddles, like when he kills Carson Wells, and he lifts his feet up at the last moment, and he checks his boots at the end of the movie after we can assume he definitely killed Carla Jean.
Well, so there's this thing, he doesn't like blood. And he always wants to be clean from blood. So yeah, there's actually a list of a bunch of clues. So the first one is he draws the shower curtain before he kills that third member of the cartel, so that when he shoots him, the blood splatters on the curtain rather than himself. And then after he kills the Mexicans in the hotel, he takes his socks off because he got blood on his socks. And then, like you said, after he kills Carson Wells, when the blood is pouring towards his feet, he puts his feet up on the bed. And then, like you said, at the end of the film, after he kills Carla Jean, he checks his boots for blood splatter on the bottom of them. So there's this...
I can actually think of a couple more, too.
Yeah.
Like when he's in the bathtub cleaning his wound, and he won't look at his wound when he's cleaning it with the water.
Yeah.
And also when he's washing his hands of the blood with the handcuffs.
Yeah, so there might be this thing where he just has an adverse reaction to the sight of blood.
It's either that, or maybe he's just trying to avoid all traces of evidence, too.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Who knows?
And he's just so capable of handling any situation. For example, when Llewellyn injures him with the buckshot in his thigh, and he has to repair himself, the Coen brothers just filmed this brilliantly, where first he causes the car to explode outside the drugstore, which is one of my favorite scenes, and he goes in and he gets all the supplies he needs in the pharmacy. And then in the hotel room, he spends hours cleaning his wound, pulling out all the shrapnel, and then I think he put steroids in his leg as well for healing. Morphine as well. So he's very intelligent and capable of repairing himself. And it's an amazing scene because you can only imagine how painful that injury is, especially like when he sits in the bathtub, or like when he's trying to pull his jeans off and he's trying to kick his boot off, and
he's not looking at
he's
the
not
blood.
looking at it, but you can see like he's experiencing it is a great intense amount of pain, but he's hiding it because he's such a unique person where he can withstand such a great amount of pain. And it's obviously bothering him, but he's barely even showing any signs of pain.
I think it's because, like I said earlier, it seems like he's been in every one of these situations a dozen times. It seems like he's been in handcuffs, seems like he's been fatally wounded, and he's just had to deal with these situations. He's probably killed 100 people in so many different ways. That's why he's always so well prepared and knows what to do, what to expect, and how to prepare for each killing.
And I think probably the most iconic thing about Anton Chigurh is his air gun, which you said he uses to kill people, but also it's the way he breaks through locks when he needs to enter a room or a building. And it's such a brilliant and terrifying situation that when, for example, when Llewellyn is in his hotel room and the lights go out and he's just waiting at the doorway, just waiting for Anton to show up, and then you just hear the tss and the pop of the lock and it hits him in the chest, and it's like the sound of that hiss is like it means your impending death.
And then his adversary in this film is Llewellyn Moss, played really well by Josh Brolin, a.k.a. Thanos. Llewellyn's a hunter and also a killer too. You can assume because
it looks like he's killed people in Vietnam.
Yeah, so he's a Vietnam War vet, and Llewellyn, like Anton, is a very capable person. He can handle himself, but he's going up, just like Sheriff Ed Tom, an actual monster that he still, till the end of the movie, to his death, never truly understands. He never truly gets what Anton Chigurh is, despite Carson Wells trying to explain it to him. And
I think so. To add on that real quick, I think that Llewellyn, he thinks that Anton Chigurh is motivated by money, but what he doesn't understand is that Chigurh is motivated by his duty more than anything.
His principles.
Yeah.
And Carson tries to explain that to him, but it's Carson, even though he thinks he understands Anton, he still doesn't understand Anton fully either. And Llewellyn, the main difference between him and Anton is obviously humanity, and Llewellyn has emotions, and his biggest weakness going up against his maniac Anton Chigurh is his empathy and his compassion. You know, when he goes back, he gets that money, he gets the satchel, and he goes back to bring the water to the Mexican gangster inside that car. That's the biggest mistake he ever made, because you can assume, or you can imagine, that if he never brought that water back, they would have never found out that it was him with the truck and chased him down, and he wouldn't be in that mess.
Yeah, he would have gotten away with it.
You can think, but also I think that either way, Anton Chigurh was going to find him.
Yeah, because he had the tracker, so maybe he would have tracked him down eventually.
Even without the tracker, for me, again, the Terminator, Anton Chigurh would stop at nothing. He'd spend his entire life, wouldn't even care, spend his entire life finding the money and finding the person, just out of principle.
He hints at that because when they're talking on the phone after the shootout, he tells Anton that Carla Jean won't be in Odessa, and then Anton says it doesn't matter where she is, which means he's like, it doesn't matter how far she goes or how long it takes, I'm going to find her. So he probably would have eventually found him.
So I think, even without the transponder, he would have found a way to find them. That's the most interesting part of that character. And also, besides the empathy being the biggest mistake he ever made, it's his pride and arrogance too, which are also human emotions, human weaknesses, because those lead to him and his wife's eventual deaths. I mean, because when you think about it, Anton Chigurh's weaknesses, he doesn't really have any weaknesses, if maybe a few, but he's a very effective killer, very clever, he ties up loose ends, does introduce himself to killing situations when he doesn't always have to, but again, he uses it to tie up loose ends, ensuring that he stays a ghost. That's why Carson Wells explains that he's a ghost, and if you've seen him alive, you're a very lucky person, because there's a 50-50 shot you should be dead.
And I really love the first act of this film, because our first sequence with Llewellyn is when he is first hunting in the desert, and then he stumbles upon the drug cartels, cars, and dead bodies. And I think it's a brilliant scene, because the whole sequence is he stumbles upon the cars, and then he tracks down very intelligently where the last man standing would have gone, and then he ends up finding the money. And
to even think that there's a last man with money is smart. It's very
I
clever.
wouldn't have thought of that, and it showed his intelligence, but also the way the Coens depicted is there's no exposition. He just mutters a few words kind of to himself, but otherwise they're showing us everything. They're not telling us everything, and it's just a brilliant sequence, just like the opening of There Will Be Blood, where they're showing this amazing 10 minutes of film where there's something very important is happening, but they're not spoon feeding us the information. We're kind of learning everything as Llewellyn is learning it, and he's even a step ahead of us because, like we said, if I stumbled upon those cars, I just would have left and called the police or something. But he knew, he's smart enough to know, I think street smart enough to know that if there was a shootout, someone survived because the money's gone. So their money,
all the drugs are here.
Yeah, but all the drugs are here. So the money must be somewhere. So I'm gonna find out where the money is. So he ultimately is the protagonist of this film, but only someone who has like an ambiguous kind of morality would even think of trying to find the money and take it from that person.
Yeah, because obviously he was going to probably have to kill somebody if he wanted to keep the money. And Llewellyn, he does seem like a good man, one who simply just takes this shot. And again, we're talking about chance versus fate here. He's clearly lived in poverty his entire life, living in trailer parks. Vietnam vets were treated like trash when they came home, so you can assume he's probably unemployed, maybe living on disability, part-time work. His wife, Carla Jean, has lived a similar life of poverty. She works at Walmart. They've never had any money. She's also the ghost of Ravenclaw Tower in Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows, FYI.
And she's in Trainspotting.
Yeah, for sure. And which is why Llewellyn takes that chance of looking for the money and then taking the money and running with it. And it's ironic how easy it was to get the money compared to how hard it was to keep the money. But again, Llewellyn's intentions were inevitably going to be sinful anyways to get the money.
Yeah, exactly. And this movie was Josh Brolin's big breakout role. He had been acting in Hollywood for a couple of decades with very little success. I think up to this point, his most prominent role was in Goonies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he was a kid back then. He was like 19. And so he had just been in these random small roles. He was an American Gangster as a supporting character, but that came out the same year as this. So 2007 was obviously a big year for Josh Brolin. And before this film, he actually was working on Grindhouse, the Robert Rodriguez film that was a double feature with Death Proof with Tarantino. And he was in Robert Rodriguez's film, and he got the opportunity to send in an audition tape to the Coen Brothers while he was making that film. And he asked Robert Rodriguez if he could borrow a video camera in order to film his audition because he didn't have one. Because this is 2006 or 2005 when they made that movie. So not everyone had video cameras back then, kids, now that anyone listening to this. And so he actually, after telling this to Robert Rodriguez and asking him for help, both Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino helped film Josh Brolin's audition tape for this movie, and they shot it using the actual film cinema cameras they were using for their films, and Robert Rodriguez and Tarantino lit the scene. And so when Josh Brolin sent his audition tape to the Coen Brothers, they're like, wow, the lighting looks amazing. Who shot this?
I love that story.
So I think that might have helped him get the role.
And another prominent character in this film is Carson Wells, played by the great Woody Harrelson, and one of my favorite roles he's ever done. He's really like funny and charming and quick-witted in this character of Carson Wells, who's basically a modern-day outlaw / bounty hunter. And again, he thinks he understands Anton, but he really doesn't. And I think all the people who are victim to Anton, their weaknesses are human emotion.
Exactly, and I think the best example of how he doesn't understand Anton, because he thinks he does, but you're absolutely right, because he's killed by Anton in the same hotel where the night before Anton killed the clerk. And I think Carson stayed in that hotel because he thought there's no way Anton would go back to the hotel where he killed someone the day before because it's still a crime scene. And so that was his big mistake, thinking that he understood that, whereas he still didn't understand just how crazy Anton was to be actually stroll back into the crime scene of his own murder.
And that's actually hinted at later on when Tommy Lee's talking to that other sheriff, and the sheriff's talking about how he went back to his own crime scene. He's like, what kind of crazy person would go back to their own crime scene?
Yeah, at the end of the film.
So, again, that's a really good point. And Carson, when he dies from Anton's gun, he tells him he knows where the money is. But again, he still truly doesn't understand this person. Anton doesn't give a crap about the money. He's more worried, and he cares more about killing the people who, like Carson says, inconvenienced him.
Yeah, like Carson's in the way. You know what I mean? Anyone who's in his way or like inconveniences him needs to be killed because that's part of his code. And like, yeah, Carson still doesn't understand because he's trying to buy his way out of the situation. And you can just see the humor that Anton is experiencing just listening to Carson beg for his life the same way everyone else does.
And I think that Carson, he has all this arrogance and pride because he's probably one of the only people alive that's ever seen
Interacted,
Anton Chigurh and lived. And so I think he probably thinks he's like on the same level as Anton Chigurh, almost. Obviously, he calls him and compares him to the bubonic plague and everything. But I think he thinks that because he's lived through Anton Chigurh, and I love how we don't find out how they know each other.
Yeah, I think just they've both been working for this employer for a long time.
Yeah,
because there are very subtle hints to what the employer does and who they are, because they have the business located in that building. And then Carson, when he first goes into the office, he mentions that there's a floor missing in the elevator, and this is hinted at. A lot of people think that architects often will not build the 13th floor out of luck, like a superstitious kind of thing of bad luck being number 13. But really, in the novel, Cormac McCarthy tells you that the 17th floor is actually the one that's missing on the elevator. And the reason for that is because the 17th floor is where all the drug ring business is done, which is why it's not accessible through the elevator. This is obviously a very big drug scheme with someone who's very powerful and wealthy, who has been employing people like Anton and Carson to deal with situations like this. And so I think obviously they have not a work history, but since they've been employed by the same person for a while, they know each other and they've interacted in situations together.
Yeah, it's actually really cool to see like the corporate aspect to these giant money running schemes, which I'm sure is super accurate to the real world situations of these giant gangs and corporate drug dealers.
I agree. And I think my favorite example of Anton portraying his lack of humanity and understanding of people is that last scene with Carla Jean when she says, "You don't have to do this," and then he kind of cracks up to himself and he says, "You people always say the same thing," and she's like, "What do they say?" And he says, "They say you don't have to do this," and he's like ridiculing people because they don't want to die, and it really shows how disconnected he is from humanity, how he has absolutely no empathy for anyone else on the planet.
And you can kind of, I like the end of the film too, because Anton is driving very like professionally and safe
Perfectly, yeah.
And he's going through that green light and he gets T-boned by that car. And in a way, every time I watch that scene where he gets destroyed by the car accident, he's got a fucking bone sticking out of his arm. For me, it's kind of like the universe is trying to stop him because of his moral evil. Like it's trying to death's trying to come for him almost because he's escaping it, and he's taking so much life that the universe is trying to find a way to kill him, but even the universe can't stop Anton Chigurh. Even fate can't stop him.
I would say that's a good point. I think it's just he is becoming victim of fate and becoming a victim of chance. And so just like the people he offers their lives up be under the power of chance, he also became a victim of chance in that situation. I think the reason why this movie works so well is because they avoided a lot of the cliches and the expectations that you would have with watching a film like this. For example, there's no big shootout at the end. There's no good guy against the bad guy. There's no big gunfight. And a lot of things are ambiguous, and a lot of things are, you can say, anticlimactic in a lot of ways, especially Llewellyn Moss's death near the end of the film, where we don't see his death. Ed Tom is driving up to the motel to talk with Llewellyn, and then he sees a few cartel guys escape the area and drive off, and when he goes into the hotel, he finds Llewellyn's dead body lying on the floor, and he obviously died in a shootout with the Mexicans, and we didn't see it happen. I mean, can you imagine any other movie not showing the death of the lead character in a situation and just showing their dead body instead? I think their portrayal of the story that we've seen so many times involving violence and gunfights and assassins and people trying to get away with stealing money, I think it was so brilliant to see it portrayed in this new way by not showing things like that.
And again, that's faithful to the book. It's how it happens in the novel.
Yeah.
It's not a big climax, and again, like you said, it's not even Anton who kills him. It's the other Mexican cartel people looking for the money because they track down the mother first, and the mother is just won't stop talking and tells them where they're going, what hotel they're going to, and so she's the one that she doesn't understand the situation she's in, lets them know where Llewellyn is. And again, this is Llewellyn's pride and arrogance, thinking that everything's going to be okay, even though I'm introducing the situation to more people, which is a giant mistake. And similar to There'll Be Blood, where we had two great antagonizing forces. Again, we have two antagonizing forces like we've been talking about with Llewellyn and Anton, and they do have that great meeting finally where they get into a gunfight where Llewellyn finally understands that there's a tracker inside the money, and he finds the tracker,
but it's too late.
It's too late because Anton's already there, and he killed the clerk, even though he asked the clerk to call him if any swinging dick comes inside the hotel that night. And it's a really great shootout because, like you said, it's not a big shootout. There aren't like bullets flying everywhere, like constantly. But
They don't fight.
Yeah, they don't even really see each other.
Yeah,
that's what's so cool about this scene is there's no hand-to-hand combat within. They're probably the closest they are is like 10 feet within each other, and they both get the upper hand on each other at different times during the shootout and the scene, and they both leave this scene fatally wounded. They're both gonna die without medical attention. And Llewellyn, he's a clever guy, and he takes some of his money. He stashes most of it, or next to the border, next to the riverbank, and then goes into Mexico to go to the Mexican hospital where he thinks he won't be traced. And then Anton, like you said earlier, goes through his self-treatment and stealing the drugs and medical gear from the pharmacy to treat his own wounds.
And that shootout is so amazing because, like we said earlier with the lack of music in this movie, this is such an intense action scene, and you don't hear a single note of music. And I think it works so well. I think if it had music, it wouldn't feel right, because this movie, it really felt authentic to what a shootout would be like. And it, like you said, they barely even see each other, and the sound effects is enough. The sound effects are enough in this situation, in this scene, and that is the music of the scene, and that's why it's so powerful.
And their only other interaction besides that is the phone call while Llewellyn's in the hospital getting better, and Anton even knows where he is. But again, Anton, no one understands him. He knows where Llewellyn is, but he won't go down and kill him. He's going to go kill his wife instead.
I think an underrated part of this film, I mean, obviously this film is beloved, and I just don't think that Tommy Lee Jones got enough attention for his role, because every second he's on screen, he is unbelievable. He's really an amazing actor. He's an Oscar winner, obviously, but I think with this movie, it's his best performance, because his character pretty much is talking about a lot of the main themes of the movie, like we talked about earlier. But I think that this is such an unbelievable performance, and obviously it's kind of understated in comparison to Javier Bardem's performance. But I think Tommy Lee Jones is just as good as him as Ed Tom, and I think that monologue at the end of the film when he's talking about the dream with his father in it is one of the most moving scenes I've ever seen in a movie, because Ed Tom, as a character, is in this really difficult position in his life because, like we talked about earlier, he doesn't understand the world anymore, and he's in his twilight years. He's getting old, and he's facing death. Death is at his door, and he's struggling with that, because he says later in the film when he meets with his brother, he thought that God was just going to come into his life, and he didn't. And he feels like he's kind of been abandoned by God. And now that he's very old and he's going to be dying probably within a few years, he kind of doesn't understand what to do with himself. And I think he discovered that he didn't really find meaning in life. And he thought he had it figured out until he reached this point. And I think that he's kind of lost as a character in this world.
And I think what happened to Llewellyn and how he wasn't able to save him really took a toll on him and really kind of sucked that loss of motivation of life out of him, because, again, at that breakfast table after he's been retired and his wife's like, I can't plan your day for you. And he recounts those two dreams, and the first one is about meeting his father, gives him some money, but he thinks he lost it. And then the second dream is him and his father riding horses through snowy mountains, and his father goes up ahead with the light to light the darkness in front of them. And I think that's obviously a representation of Llewellyn, how he wasn't able to save him and how he's just up in front of him, he couldn't catch him.
Well, I interpret that story as because he says that his father's waiting for him. And so I think that his father waiting for him with the fire is that it means that his father has already passed away, and he's in the afterlife or whatever. He's in the darkness, and now Ed Tom is on his way there, and he'll be there very soon. So I think that it's a representation of his father had passed away, and so soon Ed Tom will be passing away.
And the scene at the end of the film where he asks him about how many cats do you have? Like, have you had all these cats? He's like, oh, I talking about. He's like, some of them are half wild, and some of them are full outlaws. And to me, that's a representation of Llewellyn and even Carson versus Anton Chigurh. Chigurh is just full outlaw. He's a full animal monster killer, whereas the other two, they think they are. They're to an extent, but again, they're held back by not being tame like a cat, a house cat, but human emotion instead.
And also that even though Ed Tom represents law and order and control, there are just certain people and certain forces in the world that you will never be able to control and that you'll never be able to stop. And Anton represents that of something in nature that is just that can never be controlled and never be stopped. He is an unstoppable force of death and violence, and it doesn't matter what he's put up against, Anton will always kill his way out of it.
It's something I really love about this film, because the Coen Brothers, very funny writers, very funny directors, and I'm sure they're hilarious in real life. As dark as this movie is, as suspenseful as it is, there are some real genuine moments of immense laughter and kind of jokes. And I mean, like when Llewellyn asks for another hotel room in the same hotel, and then he looks at the map, and then the next scene, Anton's there, and he's looking at the map, and
she's like, it's got 2 double beds.
It's just really funny. And there are like maybe 5 moments in this film where you just laugh out loud, and it kind of eases the tension and keeps you riding along at like a steady pace emotionally.
Yeah. There's this a really great YouTube video of Josh Brolin. He actually filmed like a mockumentary while on set on this movie, like a comedic little 15-minute mockumentary. And it starts out as like a normal documentary, but then he and the other actors begin talking about how horrible the Coen Brothers are and how mean they are and how like they're like dictator type directors and they're horrible on set. And then Javier Bardem is like talking about this fake story where like he reached for the salt at the table when they were having lunch, and Joel Coen grabbed his hand and said, "You can't touch the salt." and then Javier Bardem goes, they're just in the hotel room, and he goes, "I'm actually uncomfortable talking more. Is there a way we can like hide my face?" So then they cut to like that typical like shadowed face silhouetted, but it's still Javier Bardem's accent. Like it's unmistakable that it's Javier Bardem. It's so funny. If you have like 15 minutes, just look up Josh Brolin mockumentary of No Country for Old Men.
I'm
it's
definitely
so
gonna watch
funny.
that tonight.
Yeah, it's great.
And again, Llewellyn's a very clever guy too, and I love the scenes where he's in the hotel rooms and he finds out that there's someone in his room, and then he gets to that other room, and
he was wise enough to put the satchel in the vents before that
to hide it, and then he gets the tent poles, which is another funny scene too. He's like,
"Which tent you want? The one with the most poles?"
You already have a tent. I got a tent. I just need the poles. And then he pulls the tent poles, the suitcase through the vents with the tent poles while he hears the gunfire. Because the genius of that scene and the way the layout of the hotel is, when Anton pulls up with the transponder, it looks like room 138. That was Llewellyn's original room. That's where the money is in the transponder, where Llewellyn's on the other side of that room in room 38.
Yeah.
And so
and the money is like in between those 2 rooms in the vent.
Yeah, so and that's why the Mexican cartel guys are inside his room waiting for him in the dark.
They're inside Llewellyn's room 38.
Expecting Llewellyn to come home.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great scene. And I think it can be a little confusing the first time you see it, trying to understand it, because it's not explained to you. But I think if you on a second viewing, you're like, oh, okay, that's how the layout is exactly.
Yeah, because they don't say that like room 138, the cartel are waiting for Llewellyn.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is great. I prefer that.
Yeah,
I prefer having to figure it out myself.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it's such a great sequence where Anton kills the cartel guys. It's really disturbing, and it shows his ruthless nature.
And Roger Deakins, I mean, this guy's a rock star. We've talked about him a couple
You
times.
always call him a rock star.
He is a rock star, man. Again, natural cinematography, very similar to There Will Be Blood. And the movie, they open it up with like a dozen beautiful landscape shots of West Texas and New Mexico, and they're really, really stellar.
You know, he actually started out as a photographer.
Yeah, that's right. Until we get to Anton Chigurh, and he's an amazing cinematographer, and I love the guy so much.
Yeah, we watched it recently to prepare for this, and having seen so many films over the last 5 years or so that he has shot digitally, you could still see the same exact artistic voice with these film shots, and he chose to start doing digital because it gave him more control, more flexibility, because he likes to shoot Lights. He likes to light his scenes with very minimal lighting and very practical lighting, like practical in terms of you're actually seeing the light in the shot.
Like a lamp.
Yeah, whatever's providing the light in the scene, you can see it. Whereas a lot of productions, they hide the light because they're like in a soundstage and all the lights are above the set and there's actually no ceiling in the set. It's just like a stage lights above them. So he doesn't like to do that. He likes to be like, okay, if this hotel room has a light right there and a lamp there, that's all I'm going to use to light the scene because that's realistic to the scene in the moment. So I think with film, he could never get quite close to what he wanted. And now with digital, he's able to really explore every possibility with lighting and be more authentic in terms of not needing more light because film in dark it doesn't have the same flexibility as the new modern digital cameras have, and so but you can still see the Sam Deacon style in this film that he's always had, and I think this is a beautifully shot film. Obviously, Robert Elswit deserved to win the Oscar, but this has some amazing cinematography and also a lot of great. There's a couple of really great cross cuts in this film, and it has my favorite cross cut in all of cinema, where it cross cuts from a shaggy carpet on the floor with the little screws in the vent door on the floor, and it cuts from the shaggy carpet, which is beige in color, and it does a crossfade to the next shot, which is a landscape of a desert, and they blend together so beautifully. It's just an amazing cut that I guarantee you Roger Deakins had that planned out.
Yeah, the thing with that is a lot of people don't understand that cinematography, it's such an art form and it's usually really well planned. Like I remember when you were talking about that amazing cinematography in Shawshank Redemption about the prison bars behind Morgan Freeman's character Red when he leaves prison versus when
the older man, I can't remember.
Oh, what's his name?
Can't remember his name.
When he leaves the prison, how the bars engulf him. Like, cinematography is an art form, and it's very elaborate. It's very well planned. These are very intelligent, experienced cinematographers. Whether they show up to set maybe with a little bit unknowing of what they're gonna see, like that happens to Roger Deakins, I'm sure. And he shows up, he's like, I don't know what I'm gonna shoot yet, but a lot of the times it's very well planned, and I guarantee that was really well planned. Or maybe if it wasn't, it just happened in editing.
No, yeah, he does. It's a combination of inspiration and also prep because, like, for example, with the Coens and then with Denis Villeneuve, like with Blade Runner 2049 and the film Prisoners, which Deakins shot, he's in Sicario, he's involved with Denis Villeneuve in the pre-production phase, and they're planning out the scenes together visually and storyboarding together before they even start production. So oftentimes Roger Deakins is very much involved in the pre-production of the films.
Yeah, he's very involved in terms of being like another filmmaker on the set besides just being the DP.
He's so important to these filmmakers because I love Inside Llewyn Davis. It's a really great film and a really beautiful film, but you could tell that it just was missing Roger Deakins' cinematography. You know what I mean? There's just and the same thing with Denis Villeneuve's films when you saw Arrival, again, beautifully shot movie, but Arrival didn't have Roger Deakins that time, and you can just tell it's missing that Roger Deakins magic. There's something magical about his ability to translate images in cinema, and no one, I think, will ever be able to do it the way he has done it. And even though these are amazing directors, when they don't have him on set helping them pick the shots out and light and move the camera, there's something missing from those movies that's obviously undeniable.
And this film also features a great supporting cast. I mean, Garrett Dillahunt as Deputy Wendell is hysterical. And what are we looking for? A man who's recently drunk milk? Oh, Sheriff, we gotta put this out there. We gotta put this out, Sheriff. And they even shot the dog. He's really funny. He's like a very positive person. And then Tess Harper as Loretta Ball. Barry Corbin as Ellis. Stephen Root. I mean,
Kelly MacDonald as Carla Jean doesn't have much screen time, but she's great.
Yeah, she's fantastic in the role. And so the supporting cast in this movie is great. And again, the Coen Brothers do such a good job casting like local people.
One of my favorite facts about this movie is that the case that the money is in this movie is actually the same exact case that the money is in Fargo.
Oh, no way.
Same exact case.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Never noticed that.
And in Fargo, I think it's $1 million, and then this movie, I think it's $2 million.
I actually recently watched Fargo, too, and I never picked up on
brilliant. That. Yeah, it's amazing.
2 days after getting the role of Llewellyn, Josh Brolin broke his shoulder in a motorcycle accident Fortunately, Llewellyn gets injured in his shoulder pretty early in the film, so it actually didn't it turned out to not be much of an issue for the character at all in filming. Despite Tommy Lee Jones having the least amount of screen time, he was top billed, and due to an error, Paramount Pictures was forced to pay him $15 million when an arbitrator found that studio's lawyers had made an error drafting Jones' deal to appear in the film.
That's crazy. I'm sure they never had him in a movie again for that studio.
And I mean, for the budget of the film was only $25 million. That's crazy.
That's nuts.
The credited editor for this film, Roderick Janes, is the pseudonym for Joel and Ethan Coen because, again, they edit all of their films.
Yeah, Janes. And the reason for that, they have to use a pseudonym because there's these weird Academy rules where you can't like be the director, writer, and editor of a movie. And also, it's pretty rare for two people to win an Oscar for directing. And the reason for that is because it's a way of preventing, especially in the past, of preventing like actors like in the past, like the golden era days of filmmaking, like a lot of actors were very much in charge of the sets, and so they would want to claim directing credit for the movies, which would cause a lot of problems with like the studio and the actual director and producers. And so the Academy implemented this rule, making it very difficult for two people to be the director of a movie. But the only way to get around that is to have an established filmography of two people directing movies together. So that's why the Coen Brothers are able to claim co-credit as directors, and that's why they're able to get nominated and also win the Academy Award for Best Director, even though there are two of them. It's very rare, but they're only able to do it because they've been making movies together for so long.
Heath Ledger had actually been in talks to play Llewellyn Moss, but he withdrew to take some time off instead. He eventually played the Joker in The Dark Knight in 2008. His Oscar win for that film succeeded Javier Bardem's win in the same exact category for Best Actor in a Supporting Role.
Yeah, two great villains back-to-back years. What a friggin' decade, man. It's crazy.
This was the second Best Picture Academy Award winner to be produced, directed, written by, and edited by the same person, well, two people in this case. The first was James Cameron for Titanic.
This is one of my favorite movies. You could argue it could be the best Western of all time. And it's just one of the greatest movies of this century so far.
Yeah, I think No Country for Old Men is probably my favorite movie of all time. Every time I see it, I get new things out of it. It's phenomenal. Amazing script, amazing directing. Characters are phenomenal. The acting's superb. Every time I watch it, I'm just blown away. And it was a great movie to pair with There Will Be Blood. I mean, two very, again, similar films that came out the same year and competed for Oscars and awards. And I was so stoked to do this episode with these two films because they're so special. They'll live on forever. They'll probably just get more notoriety as the years go on. And this wraps episode 53 of Raiders of the Lost podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, hit the notification bell, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, and support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Take care, everyone.